let's install our zipper in the adventure jacket. If you're worried about installing a zipper, I hope this video helps you. I actually think zippers are really simple to do. And I hope after you install your first zipper, if this is your first zipper, or after you install this zipper, you no longer fear them. First, we're going to make sure our zipper is the perfect length. We have already folded at the bottom 1/2 inch, and then this is a youth, so it's 1 inch. If you're doing an adult, it's 1/2 inch and then 1 1/4. We're going to line up the very bottom of our zipper with that second fold. So on the youth, it is 1 1/2 inches from the bottom edge. And the adult would be 1 3/4 from the very bottom edge. I am going to show how to mark your zipper here, and then I'm going to speed up the video very quickly because I actually have individual videos if you need to shorten a plastic zipper or if you need to shorten a metal zipper. So there's 2 markings here, one right at the seam, so 1/2 inch below the top edge, and then slightly above the top edge. You're going to go ever so slightly above the top edge instead of exactly 1/2 inch, which would be the top, because we need to seal the zipper tape, and that will seal just a little tiny bit. All right, I like to mark on both sides also, just to make sure when we zip up our zipper, it's perfectly even. So do that when your zipper is zipped all the way up. All right, I'm going to speed this up. And if you need more detail and help on shortening your zipper, you can click those links in your tutorial. I have one for a plastic zipper that is actually Miss Alex doing that. She has a great trick for making a new zipper stop. And then I have a metal zipper one, and I'll show you another way to make a zipper stop than Alex does for your metal zips. Okay, now that we have the perfect length zipper, what we're going to do is put it right sides together to our main fabric. I like to unzip it, do each side at a time. Does not matter which side you do first, but we're going to line it exactly the same way we did when we marked it to shorten it. So the very bottom edge should be perfectly aligned to that top fold. And as you can see, I like to actually fold my fabric up and meticulously place this. You can be as meticulous as you want. Zippers are one thing, they're very easy to install, but they are one thing that if you're off on certain areas, it is very easy to tell with the naked eye. So on certain parts of a zipper install, it does pay to be a little meticulous. The top and the bottom placement are very important. You need to be very meticulous in placing it exactly where you want. The zipper stop should be exactly at your seam allowance. Your seam line should go just right above that zipper stop. Another place that you can mark on both sides of your zipper while it's zipped up is the seam line from the front to the top front yoke. So visually it shoots across the chest, and if those seam lines don't line up perfectly when you zip up your jacket on the left and the right, it's going to be noticeable. So just while your zipper is zipped up, mark your zipper tape just like we did to mark how much we need to shorten it, and make sure those stay aligned to your seam line there. And I'm sorry my head gets in the way. I do move it here in just a second. I'm just basting, if you can see my longer stitch length here. I do not change my foot yet. You don't need to get super close to the zipper tape. All we're doing is basting the zipper in place. We're not actually doing a final stitch here. It is important to get it nice and neat, of course, because we're holding it in place. So I'm aligning the very edge of my zipper tape to the edge of my fabric here. And I'm just zipping down here, making sure nothing is stretching or pulling. I'm using a woven fabric here. If you're using a fabric with any kind of stretch, even if it's just a loosely woven fabric, so like a flannel, linen, anything that warps very easily or stretches very easily, you want to add some interfacing. Okay. This was a rain jacket, waterproof fabric. It was incredibly not stretchy and very, very stiff. So I did not add any interfacing. But if you're using fabric that warps or stretches or has any kind of movement, go ahead and add some interfacing. It'll make it a little bit easier for you. I'm going to repeat on the other side again, right sides together, aligning the bottom and the top very meticulously, very carefully. And if you marked the seam line on the chest, the front yoke to the front, go ahead and align that as well. We're just going to do the same thing. We're going to do a basting stitch all the way down it. Once you've basted it, zip it up and check. Make sure the bottoms are aligning perfectly, your top is aligning perfectly at the neck, and your seam line is aligning perfectly on that yoke to the bottom seam line. If not, the basting stitch is so quick and easy to take out and fix your zipper. You might think nothing's stretching, it'll be perfect. Go ahead and check it. If it's your first zip and you didn't mark all the things, just go ahead and check it. This is not going to take but 30 seconds to go ahead and check it and make sure it's maybe not perfect, but perfect enough for you. Okay? One thing I've learned of sewing every day for years and years is that a quick baste is always worth the time. It's always worth the time. Especially if you're doing something that you really want as close to perfect as you can possibly get. All right, now that we've basted, you can zip it up. Just make sure everything is aligning perfectly or close to perfectly as you are happy with. Then we're going to align our lining fabric to our main, and this is where we're going to be doing our final stitch. I'm going to speed this up just a little bit because it does take me quite a while to kind of get the lining exactly where I want it. It's not really necessary, but I do like to put the lining sleeves inside the main fabric. We're not stitching those. It is not really necessary, but I like to do that to just get them out of the way. So I don't want anything flying around inside there I don't want to accidentally stitch the sleeve into the neckline because it's flopping around in there, right? So I just shove them in there to get them out of the way. And then we're just going to align all along the neckline. The neckline of the main and the lining should be exactly the same. You either have a hood or a collar already basted to the neckline as well. Does get pretty thick there if you're using thicker fabrics, so take your time, use quite a bit of pins and clips, making sure everything is nice and smooth. And you're going to pin down the fronts. If everything is cut perfectly and sewn perfectly, your lining is going to end up 1/2 inch above the top fold. So on the youth, it should end up 2 inches above the raw edge. You fold it up 1/2 inch and then another inch. Your lining should be 1/2 inch above that fold. If it comes out differently, I still don't recommend kind of stretching or easing or pulling. If you used interfacing down the center fronts, or your fabrics that you're using have absolutely zero stretch, it should come out nice and perfect for you. Okay? If it doesn't, it's all right. Sometimes we get off a little bit when we cut or sew, or things get eased in, you know. It should be 1/2 inch above that fold line, so 1/2 inch above the zipper, okay? Now we're going to stitch our final stitch down the zippers. So I'm going to change to my zipper foot. And then I'm actually just going to leave my zipper foot on the whole time. You can change back to your normal foot for the neckline if you're not comfortable sewing the neckline also with your zipper foot. I like to line up the edge of my fabric with the edge of my zipper foot. So that's about a 3/8 inch seam allowance. You don't want your needle right up against your zipper teeth because your zipper pull needs room to zip up and down. So about a 3/8 inch seam allowance is what you're going to need so that your zipper pull has room to move up and down. If you sew it at a 1/2 inch and you get that needle right up against the zipper teeth, you might like the way that looks because you can't see the zipper tape as much. But your zipper pull is going to be either really, really tight to move up and down, or you just really can't move it up and down. So if you're worried about your seam allowance here, baste, turn it right sides out, move your zipper pull up and down until you have a seam allowance that you're really happy with. I like using about 3/8 of an inch. That makes me happy with the amount of zipper tape that is showing and gives me plenty of room for my zipper pull to move up and down. Now we're at the top corner. I'm using my fingers, as you can see, to really feel exactly where my zipper stop is because I want my needle to pivot right at that zipper stop. You can see I'm just feeling with my fingers exactly. And then I go ahead and just go around the neckline. Again, you can stop there, change your zipper, your sewing machine foot if you want to sew this with a regular sewing machine foot. You only need the zipper foot for down the 2 fronts. I like to do it all in one go. I don't know, call me efficient, call me lazy, whatever it is. I like to do it all in one go and I just leave the zipper foot on. You do use your regular 1/2 inch seam allowance here. So I was using the smaller 3/8 along the zipper. You're going to use your regular bigger 1/2 inch seam allowance here along the neckline. It's a lot of layers here. So take your time and go nice and slow around the curve of the neckline. Once we get to the front, we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to use our fingers to feel where that zipper stop is. See, I'm really just making sure my needle goes right above that zipper stop, and then I make a sharp pivot. Make sure your needle is still down when you do that pivot, and then go down the other front. 3/8 of an inch seam allowance down here is what I like, just the same as the other side. Since your zipper is already basted to your main fabric, all you're doing is making sure your lining is not getting eased in any way. Okay. And again, your lining does not go all the way down. That's okay. Do not panic. It's not meant to. This bottom extra of the main is what's going to end up being our casing for our elastic along the bottom. And I ran out of bobbin thread, y'all. Happens to the best of us, you know. We try to play chicken and sometimes we lose. Sometimes we lose. Luckily, it wasn't very much. No curse words were said this time. At least I don't think they were. What is the worst bobbin one? How long have you sewn with an empty bobbin? That is the worst, isn't it? When you don't realize it, you've been sewing forever. All right, we're almost done with this zipper, okay? I do like to trim my seam allowances. Before I trim anything though, I just double check everything. Double check nothing got caught that shouldn't have gotten caught. The hood and the collar look good, things like that, okay? Just check, just to make sure. I like to go around the neckline with pinking shears, especially if you're using super thick fabrics, or like my rain jacket fabric, it was very, very stiff. So I like to trim these top corners off for the seam allowance so that it turns a really nice sharp little L shape there when I turn it right sides out. One little note, if you do inseam pockets, this is where you want to tack them down. I'm going to skip that in this video. If you watch the full sew up, you can see that little spot. But not everyone does inseam pockets, so this is just the zipper video. I'm just going to show the zipper. So turning right sides out, be careful pressing your zipper with your iron. It's a nylon zipper tape, and as we showed, nylon melts very easily when we shortened our zippers. So you don't want to melt your zipper tape when you're pressing it. My rain jacket fabric here was also nylon, so I couldn't press it anyways. But if you are pressing your fabric, which is always a good idea, just be careful around the zipper not to have a super high heat on the zipper tape or it will melt. I like to use this little bamboo stick to turn out my corner to a nice L the best that I can. And once we're happy with everything turned right sides out and pressed nicely and neatly, we're going to repress these bottom folds. So if it's a youth like mine, you're going to do 1/2 inch and then another 1 inch. And your lining should be 1/2 inch above that top fold. And then they should overlap about 1 inch on the youth. The adult is slightly different. They overlap a little bit more, but we're going to pin right here along the very front, and we're going to catch this as we top stitch the zipper. I had this rain jacket fabric was very, very stiff and thick, so I had a hard time getting the pins through these layers. This is one of the thickest little areas right here. The neckline gets fairly thick as well, but this bottom hem right here at the very front corner is fairly thick as well. And we're just going to repeat on the other side. The same thing, make sure everything's nice and neat, and then we're just going to refold those already pressed fold lines along the bottom. So 1/2 inch and then another 1 inch for the youth. And this should overlap the lining so that you no longer see any raw edges anymore. If your lining isn't 1/2 inch above the fold line as it should be, if everything is cut and sewn correctly, don't stress too much. As long as they're overlapping, just make sure everything's lying nice and smooth. You don't want to force it to be 1/2 inch above. If something was cut a little bit longer or something was eased in somewhere and your lining ends up going a little bit further down and overlapping a little more, it's better to allow it to overlap a little bit more than to force it to be 1/2 inch above the fold line, and then you have kind of wrinkles of extra lining. So smooth everything out, let it lie where it wants to lie. If you want to, you can trim off any extra. I gave you 1/2 inch of overlap for wiggle room. just in case it ends up short, you know, you'd have to be a whole 1/2 inch off for it to not overlap. So hopefully you're within that 1/2 inch of wiggle room that I gave. So we're just going to top stitch here. This is one of those things where it's top stitch at a seam allowance that you like the look of. I often do about a 1/4 of an inch, but you can do it whatever you like. You can get a really tight top stitch, you know, a 1/16 of an inch from that front fold if you want. You can do an 1/8, and I do an 1/8 of an inch often as well. Sometimes I do a 1/4. If my fabric is very plush, I tend to use a bigger seam allowance when I top stitch. I like the way that looks better. If my fabric is thinner, then I usually do a smaller one. I just like to match my top stitching kind of all over the whole jacket. Just whatever I decide at the beginning, I just kind of stick with throughout the pattern usually. But we're just going to top stitch this, making sure that your lining underneath doesn't get any bobbles. A tiny bit of my zipper tape here was fraying, so I quickly took a lighter to it and sealed it. But you do want to make sure as you're sewing with the main fabric up that you're not getting any bobbles or gathers or anything underneath. So go nice and slowly, especially around this neckline. Again, I don't change my feet. I do it all in one go. If you're not comfortable top stitching the neckline with the zipper foot, you can certainly do that separately with a regular sewing machine foot. There is quite a bit of bulk here though on both sides, so go nice and slowly. Keep checking underneath, just like this, to make sure your lining is staying nice and flat and it's not getting folded under there. You're not catching any fabric that you're not supposed to be catching in this top stitch, because it is quite bulky. You got your hood or your collar on the one side, you got a full jacket on the other side. If you're doing thicker fabrics like Sherpa, it can easily kind of get a little bobble here and there on the underside. So just make sure you're checking underneath and making sure that lining is laying just how you want it as you're top stitching. I'm just working this sharp corner as much as I can to get it a sharp L shape. I'm going to pivot with your needle down here. Get a nice sharp turn. You are going to have to move your zipper pull at one point. I usually move it down, so pretty far down, and then move it at the very end. But you can do it the opposite. You can do it in the middle, whatever you're comfortable with. It really doesn't matter. Just making sure everything's nice and smooth on the main side and the lining side. You don't want any extra fabric creeping in to the right of your needle. You want it pressed nice and neatly. And after this, we'll be done with our zip. You did it. You installed a zipper. It wasn't that bad. I feel like zippers get a bad rap of being scary, and I actually find them quicker and easier than buttons any day. Any day. So hopefully with this video, it was pretty quick and simple for you as well. Here I'm going to move my zipper pull. Make sure your needle's down. Move your sewing machine foot up, but leave that needle down when you are moving your zipper pull. I accidentally put my pin on the underside, so I had to remove it fairly early. And then of course I just whacked whacked my camera a little bit. Y'all, it is very difficult to sew with the camera right in your face. I know I've complained of it before, but it truly is. Again, I had to remove my pin a little early, so I'm going pretty slowly here, trying to make sure everything is lined up perfectly. Catch that underside. And there we go. You're done with your zipper. It's nice and neat. It's beautiful on the inside and the outside. I hope this video helped. If you were a little intimidated by installing the zipper, I would really love to see your adventure jackets and your zipper installs, especially those posts that say, I was so worried about this zipper, and it really was quick and easy, and I can't wait to sew up more zippers. Don't forget to tag us when you share. We absolutely love seeing your makes. Bye, y'all.